People always talk about oil painting like it's one of the most expensive and complicated ways that you could possibly learn how to paint. And I understand why they think that way. I mean, look at all this stuff. But it doesn't have to be so complicated, and I'm going to show you that today. I think oil painting is one of the most forgiving and flexible painting mediums out there. So today I'm going to show you everything you need to learn how to paint, and then we're going to make a painting. Let's get started. Now, I just want to say, painting is about understanding, and I think people tend to care the most about what matters the least. And the first one of those is materials. And I'm going to talk to you about materials. I'm going to tell you everything you need, don't worry. But a lot of people seem to think that better materials equals better painting. But it couldn't be further apart. The only thing that will make you a better painter is practice and understanding. So study the masters for long enough and you'll become one.
I made a free PDF in the description that goes over all the materials I talked about in this video in more detail.
First, you're going to need something to paint on. This is called canvas board. It's a piece of cardboard, that's the board part, with a piece of canvas glued to it. They're pretty cheap. You can pick up a 5-pack at any art store, and they're easy. You can paint right on top of them. I'm going to recommend you get about 9 by 12. That's inches. Sorry, Europeans. I don't know about your fairy tale units. You guys can figure it out, I'm sure. Or maybe a little bit smaller. We're going to want to paint about 3/4 life size. So for a portrait, that's going to be a little bit bigger than my hand, give or take. And that's a nice size to paint at. You might think you're conserving resources by painting smaller so you can paint cheaper, but remember, painting smaller is much harder, and we want to make things easy and simple for ourselves. If you don't feel like doing that, you can also get gesso. This is acrylic gesso. It dries fast, it's easy, and basically you can put this on any surface and then paint on it, like cardboard or wood or whatever scraps you have lying around. When you're just studying, it doesn't matter. So this is a little bit cheaper, but you got to do a little bit of prep work yourself, so you can make that decision. I like to use Bristol board. That's just a tough, thick, smooth paper, and you can put this 1 coat, 2 coats on it, whatever, and paint right on it, and that's a really easy way to go about that. So the choice is yours. Basically, oil paint kind of just eats whatever surface it's on. It's very acidic or something like that, and you need to seal the surface off before you paint on top of it, or else it's not going to last a long time. Now, it doesn't really matter if it lasts forever because, again, you're just studying. You also don't want the oil paints to absorb into like the cardboard that you might be painting on, for example. It's going to make the paint look really weird. So let's just make it easy for ourselves and pick up something that's moderate quality and get going. Next, you're going to need some brushes. I just went to the discount store and I picked up a pack of 6 brushes for $6. Maybe these will suck. I don't know. We'll see. But I have high hopes for them. They're bristle brushes, so hog bristle or a synthetic bristle. The synthetic ones are softer, and you really kind of want a nice thick bristle brush for when you start painting because oil paint's really thick and it's really heavy and goopy, and if you have a really weak soft brush, it's going to be hard to pick up and move around, and that's what we want to do. We want to move around paint. Over time, you'll probably become a bit of a hoarder like me, and you'll start to accumulate brushes. But honestly, most of these I picked up off the clearance shelf for under a few dollars a piece, normally $2, $3, $4, maybe $5 a piece. I own very few expensive brushes. Each brush kind of does its own thing, it has its own properties, but we're just trying to make things simple and fun here. You don't have to worry about all that. And yeah, you might become a hoarder if you like this stuff, but let's just take it one step at a time before you get crazy, all right? This is a cheap, weak synthetic brush, and it's very soft. It's not going to pick up oil paint very well. It's not strong enough. If we go to our Chad bristle brush, it's going to be a lot more resistance, and that's a good thing. And even the synthetics included in this kit are actually a little bit tougher than some of these really cheap ones like this that might be better for acrylic or water-based painting. These ones, they're not bad. So that's actually pretty good. Maybe you can look for a set that looks like this. I wouldn't pay more than $15 for it. Yeah, it should serve you well. All right, now for paint, I'm gonna do some black magic. We're only gonna use 4. Well, actually, it's really 2 colors. Where did that go? It's only really 2 colors. So I have white. These are, at least you know that I actually paint. I'm not making all this up. This is titanium white. This is ivory black. This is yellow ochre. And this is cadmium red hue. It's kind of like a mixed up lab-made variant of cadmium red, because cadmium red is questionable on its safety, and it's just, I recommend this stuff. It's nice and easy. For brands, I recommend something like Winsor & Newton, Holbein, Rembrandt, anything that's kind of that mid-tier. You want to avoid words like craft or artist paint. And make sure it says oil paint on it too. You want to make sure you're getting the right one. The thing with oil paint is that it's a bunch of crushed up rocks bound in oil. If it was bound in gum, then it would be watercolor. If it was bound in acrylic, plastic, whatever, it would be acrylic. So when it's bound in oil, if you're buying cheaper paint, normally that means that they're just putting less crushed up rocks in and more oil. You're probably not getting a better deal. You're probably just paying for more oil. You actually might be getting a worse deal by buying cheaper paint. So just get a mid-quality artist grade brand like Winsor & Newton. And these 4 colors. That's all we need to make a great portrait, actually. It's kind of incredible. We don't even have a blue one here, but I'll show you. So mediums are kind of your alchemy and potions and elixirs, and you can mix them into all of your paints in order to get them to do different stuff. But you don't even know what oil paint does, so you probably shouldn't be mixing a whole bunch of crap into it. I'm only going to recommend to you linseed oil. You can clean with it, you can thin your paint with it, you can do pretty much everything you need to do with a little bit of linseed oil. This is actually walnut oil. I'm actually out of linseed oil right now. It's going to work pretty much the same. And you're going to need something to put your paint on too. I almost forgot. This is a nice fancy artist palette. It's like $50 or so. But really you can paint on anything. You can use some paper plates or whatever. Generally you want the surface to be non-absorbent, but for like $5 or $10, you can normally get a medium-sized wood palette at the art store. And that's going to work just fine. So just use whatever, guys. You know, this is your first painting, and you can slowly get materials as you go and as you enjoy and want to experiment with new things. We're just about making this fun and approachable and easy. That's why we're here. Hello, Skelly. What do we paint now? Let's go do it.
Now, I'm going to choose this painting to make a study or a copy of. I think copying is one of the best ways. Don't let all these fake art teachers tell you that copying is soulless and horrible. Copying is a free education, a free master class. And as soon as you have some basic drawing skills underneath you so you can get good at those proportions, do your best. You know, it's always a constant improvement as far as proportions go. Just do the best you can today. But as soon as you have some base level of drawing skill, copying is one of the best ways that you can learn for free and improve and just learn so much. And this is a academic painting by John Singer Sargent, who would later, this is early in his career, right? Academic means he's still in his studying time. Later in his career, he would go on to become one of the greatest or most well-known painters of all time. This guy gets talked about nowadays more than a lot of other great 19th century painters. And I think it's really important to look at old paintings when we look at them, not to look at all these surface level details. We need to go back and study the way that masters became masters, because they weren't born that way. That's entirely a rumor. It's totally made up. Nobody was born good at painting. All these great painters in the 19th century, they didn't just pop out of nowhere. There's a great school going on. There's great education, great teachers, and they had such an incredible understanding of painting and the human figure, and these skills, they just don't come from nowhere. So let's study exactly how they painted and how they looked at the world, because that's just what painting is. You don't get a whole lot of time to sit down and just look at the world and study something without any judgments or without any preconceived notions in your head. That's the beautiful thing about painting. We just get to look at something and think about it and understand it. And there's not a lot of time in our lives that we do that nowadays. So a lot of people will tell you that old painting is all built in layers, or they'll even throw out all these complicated terms like grisaille or underpainting or verdaccio or whatever way you want to say this. Don't listen to all this stuff. All right? Old painting, there's a variety of different techniques that it was made in. I'm talking about the 19th century when I talk. You don't got to worry about all this history stuff if you don't want to. But when we look at these paintings, we actually see, and if you zoom in on this stuff, it's very clear. Look how direct this paint is. And by direct, I mean just taking a bunch of paint on your paintbrush and you just put it on the canvas. It's not that complicated. All you got to do is put the right color in the right spot. You don't got to worry about, oh, I need to build this up in layers. I need to use glazes and washes and all this complicated system. No, we're just going to focus on mixing the right color and putting it in the right spot. It's all about being simple. And there's no wonder why all these great artists in the 19th century became so good and were so prolific, made so many paintings, because they were so efficient. They weren't worried about all these different systems. They weren't teaching this stuff. They weren't teaching this grisaille or layered painting approach in the late 19th century, or really for the most of the 19th century. They weren't even bothering with that. They were just like, hey, we don't really care exactly how you put the paint on the canvas. As long as it looks good, as long as you're accomplishing your goal, then that's fine. And that leaves you room to go express yourself, to go make the art that you want. And that's why we study, right? We don't want to study just to study. We don't want to get caught up in the iconography of painting. We understand what it's for. So let's zoom in here, and we can really see some just great thick brushstrokes. That's what I love, especially about Sargent, but this is early Sargent. Remember that this is an academic painting. The style is not revolutionary. Every single person in the academy is painting pretty much like this. In order to be allowed to paint, you had to have a few years of drawing experience. So Sargent, if you know the name, it's actually really not as unique as you think. Pretty much everyone at the time was painting very similar to this, just like this. And I love, you can see these hard carve outs here for these shadows. We have light coming from one side, the left side, and coming down and casting a shadow on the right side of the face. So everything on our face that faces the right here gets a shadow. That's something that's important to note. I think these paintings are honest. And I know honest is a weird word to use with painting, but especially the academic paintings, they're not trying to be this kind of grandiose portrait. They're not trying to upsell the person's features or idealize them or turn them into Greek gods. No, they're just looking at someone and jotting down notes about them. That's all it is. And it's a beautiful study of observation, of looking at people, of understanding what you're seeing. That's what painting is. And I think that there's just so much that we can learn from looking at older paintings, zooming in on them. I think people don't do it enough. People would much rather read an article that is not well researched than look at the painting themselves and actually see how they were painted and think about, how can I mimic that? How can I recreate that? So let's move over to the drawing board and really do a good study of this. I think we can make this pretty simple. This is titanium white, my cadmium red, my yellow ochre, and my ivory black. I know there's a little bit of other color on here like blue. That's just kind of scrapings. And I got my cheap brushes right here. I also have a little palette cup, and this has linseed oil on it. You can just put it in a little bit of Tupperware. You guys didn't see that. And I know we're really excited to get painting, but we gotta hold on. I'm really sorry to do this to you, but it's really important to understand that drawing and painting are not two different things. They're the exact same thing. It's like maybe singing and poetry. Like they're both using your voice, and they come from the same set of logic. So we need to probably do a good drawing here first, and that's gonna help us be in a much better place for our painting, so we don't have to get all worried about losing our proportions and having no idea where stuff goes. When we paint, we just want to focus on our colors, putting it in the right spot, and our drawing is going to make us be able to do that. Put my brushes down, and I have a little piece of charcoal right here. This is vine charcoal. You can also use just a 8B or 6B or 2B or whatever type of piece of graphite you have, a little pencil you have. First, I'll mark the top and the bottom of where I want my head to be on here. So that's the top of the hair. Here's kind of the bottom of the chin. I'm thinking this is gonna fit nice and centered on my canvas. It's gonna use up a good amount of it. I'm not super small or super big. The neck kind of curves in just like this under here. I want to use kind of big strokes from the arm in order to get a good drawing down. And I think just the general character, like a caricature artist, or the general big shape is kind of like an oval. So from our chin here, this is where our chin is, we have kind of a tilt of the head like this. This angle, make sure you get those tilts right, it's very important. There's the right side of my face. Coming up to the hair here. I'm gonna use big straight lines to kind of just block in those perimeters. We don't want to get caught up in any details or anything like that. We're just kind of trying to get a big perimeter outline of what we're looking at without any detail. We want to forget what we know about the face and just think about things in the order that they're meant to be built. So we need to build our house from the foundation upwards. We can't just put floating windows in the house. When we're pouring that foundation, pouring the concrete here. Bump this chin up a little bit, just since we see so much of the underside of the chin here, because we're looking kind of upwards at our figure, so we see the undersides of things. And we have a center line that's tilting from left, or from right to left. We kind of have this center tilt to the face, and that center line is cutting through, and we want to make sure we get the angle of that center line really working well. It's super important. Take your time, look at your reference photo, hold your pencil up to it, get that angle, and put it right on there. That's really important to get right, so we want to make sure we get that. Use my kneaded eraser. Here's why I like Vine Charcoal. It cleans up so easily. You just hit it with the eraser and it's going to go up right away. And that makes these drawing stages really easy and stress-free. Don't have to care about all these details. I just want to make sure I get that big shape on there correctly. That's the only thing that's important. I keep correcting the angle of that center line until I think it's right. And when I look at this kind of big shape here, I'm looking at my reference and I'm like, okay, what are the big differences? And to me, maybe mine feels a little bit wide. Yeah, maybe a little bit wide, I think. You know, I think I might have been wrong with that center line too at first. I think it is. It's right to left, so you're gonna make mistakes too doing this, and that's okay. The nice thing about oil and the nice thing about charcoal is that you can always erase it and just fix it. You're going to see stuff wrong, and you need to understand that art is not a process where you just go in and do everything right on the first try. No, even the greatest painters of all time made mistakes, and it's a process of making adjustments and sticking with it and trusting in your technique and your understanding in order to push further. Here's my neck connecting up to that head, and I'm not going to focus on the neck and shoulders here because we're just making a quick painting just to get comfortable. But that should be, I think, a decent outline. Bring it in just a little bit. Just taper those sides in a little bit. And then we're going to want to put our thirds of the face on. So that's going to be our brow down to our nose, and our nose down to our chin, right? So our face sits into thirds. I'm not sure mine is even actually, but I have the bottom of my nose to the bottom of my chin, bottom of my nose to my brow line, and my brow line to the top of my forehead. Boom, boom, boom. Thirds of the face. And that's really important to get and just mark, and then you can make sure that they're thirds by going like this. 1, 2, 3. Hey, I got it right on my first try. That's a nice guess. Now here's the thing, we're looking kind of upwards at this person. So that top third is probably going to get diminished a little bit because it's leaning back, and the bottom third might be a little bit bigger. I could check it on my reference photo the same way I checked it on my drawing. And it looks like on her they're actually really even, so. Okay, great. I know that you guys can do this. You just got to be patient. That ear kind of curves down from that brow line, and the nose the same. That looks pretty decent. So I think our ear is going to fit right in here. And likewise on the other side, but we kind of only see a small sliver over there. Now we're just going to want to mark out a few features on here before we proceed. I know that this is really kind of scary and we're in murky water here, but just hang in there and do the best you can. And if you get it wrong, nobody's watching, all right? I promise you. And people don't even know the reference photo you're using, so just try to make it look vaguely human, I guess. It's your first time. You can't focus on drawing and painting and all these different things at the same time. Anytime you learn something new, you're gonna get a lot worse before you get better, and that's normal, right? As you get better, your bandwidth of what you can think about is gonna increase. Here's that little shape. I'm just looking at the shadows and thinking about them as individual shapes. Here's that little shape, that shadow under the left, or our left eyebrow, and I'll do, oh my god. So I'm thinking about all these little shadows as shapes, just kind of easy, simple shapes. And this shape under the eyebrow here comes over, and then it comes down, and then it comes over.
And it kind of curves out and around. There's our shadow shapes for the eye. And we get a little shadow that kind of projects off of the right side of the eyeball over there as well. So why don't we put that in? And we get a shadow on the underside of the nose too. That kind of shows us where the top and the bottom plane of the nose is, if we were to think about it like a box. We're not trying to draw features or our ideas of what a nose is here, though. That's really important. We're just thinking about everything in the simple, easy to communicate way. Kind of like boxes or whatever. So there's the bottom side of our nose. And look at how much we're able to communicate about the person without thinking about them at all. Like, we're not thinking about what an eye is or what a nose is and getting caught up on all that stuff, but it looks more like them, because when you see your friend walking down the street all the way down there, you don't see the color of their eyes and go, oh, that's Ben, my friend. No, you see their general proportions, the way that they walk, their style, their character. You see these big ideas first, these abstract ideas. And that's what defines people. That's how you get likeness. So don't get caught up in the details, because that's actually only going to pull you further away from likeness. I know it's hard. As artists, we have to think about things backwards, and that really hurts. Your brain is to totally relearn the way that you look at the world, but it's more powerful in the end, and you won't be a little human photocopier. That's why people think art like this is some sort of photocopying endeavor, or that 19th century or old art is about photocopying. Well, first off, they didn't really have the photo for most of that time, but it's a really common misunderstanding. They were looking for a realism greater than life, because they were looking for understanding. And now when people do kind of this photorealism stuff, they're not understanding anything at all. They are literally just photocopying. So we're trying to go back to the old realism, where people are using this as a mindful and thoughtful way to look at the world. And we'll put our shadow under the nose. And that kind of just, there's a couple different values, how light or how dark something is, worth of shadows that are going around the mouth here. And in areas like that, it's pretty confusing, right? But I'm just going to simplify them all together. So kind of come around the chin there, come around the mouth. And there's that shadow that I'll group it in with just this kind of, I don't even know if it's hair or if it's a shadow of hair. What does it matter? Kind of group that all in, and now we have a really nice set of shapes that describes what we're looking at here. So we're on a good track here. Okay, let's just start painting. I think we're in a good spot here, and it might not be perfect, but we're not looking for perfect today. We're looking for paint. So we want to just block in these biggest color masses possible first. This is a painting by Sargent. I know Sargent, just from my reading and research, he used to put the background in pretty early on and just work for the biggest shapes possible. So why don't we mix that background color first, and I'll use a nice big brush for it. I'll use my biggest one. I'm probably not going to use this one in the face. I know that these brushes look quite oversized for how big this portrait is, but you want to use the biggest brush possible, because again, we're shooting for simplicity, we're shooting for understanding. We don't want to get caught up in all these tiny little details. This is spray fixative. Normally I do this one outside, but you might get a more interesting commentary if I huff some of these fumes. Oh yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it right off the bat. I love that smell. So that's gonna just keep this from smudging now. It's a little wet, so it's still gonna smudge a little bit, but the vine charcoal is gonna lift right off, or it's gonna make your paint a little bit darker or grayer or muddier. So fixing it down is nice. If you don't have any of that, I recommend you get some. It's a really great tool as an artist. If you're just doing your first painting though, and you've done a little sketch, I'd do it either in like a colored pencil is a really good one to do it, because it's a little bit waxy and it won't lift off. Or you could just take a rag and dust this thing off until it's a really faint drawing. And that works just as well. So that's fine. Woo! I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. That is really strong. Color theory is its own thing, but people overcomplicate this stuff way too much, you guys. So what is this background? Let me look. Well, it's dark, right? So let's think about value, how light or how dark it is. It's dark. I'd say out of 10, if black is 0 or 1 rather, and 10 is white, I'd say out of 10, that's probably a 3, maybe a 4, probably 3 out of 10. So yeah, why don't we just throw some black on here? And also, what else is it? Well, it's red. It's kind of red, maybe a little bit orangey, I guess, but mostly red. So let me grab some. This is kind of older Oh, that's a lot of red, maybe a little bit too much. Let's get it down to that value. Let's get it to that 3 out of 10 area. I think we're pretty close right there, but let's get a little bit darker. And you really want to use lots of paint, guys. Don't, I know that you just spent a bunch of money on it. You don't want to use it all, but great things happen with thicker paint. And you can look at how thick that paint was in the photos that I was showing. All sorts of great paintings that are really thick, even though they're very delicate. So don't get caught up in this idea that everything has to be thin. I think I might have went a little bit too dark there, but that's okay because this is not, we can put some down to test it. But one, yeah, it definitely looks too dark. But also, I think that it needs to be a little bit more kind of orangey. So I'm gonna put orange into it. And maybe now I see it's graying out a little bit, so I'll put a little bit more red in there. Not bad. Maybe a little bit more red. I'm just gonna keep comparing back to my reference. That's pretty good. I'm gonna throw a little bit more red in. It's just about making those adjustments until it's in the right spot. And yeah, I think that's fine. A little bit of yellow. And this is probably the one time I will use linseed oil. It's helpful for the background, so I'm just dipping. And let me grab it and show you guys. I'm just dipping my brush in just a little bit, not too much. You can always go back for more. And working into my paint there. Now it's a little bit runny. And want to make sure we don't mess up our drawing too bad. Here in the background, I'm just scrubbing it in, getting into the texture of that canvas. A little bit more on there. Maybe a little softer touch around the side here, because I kind of see how this blends in there, so it might be useful to have some overlap without ruining my drawing too much. Scrub that in a little bit. Scoop up this just like a shovel. Careful here, because it's light on this side, so I don't want the dark to touch my light areas too much. Might create some trouble for me later. There is a darker tone down here, like the hair in the background. I just kind of put it in light over there, so I should be able to go right over the top. With the oil paint, you really can, as long as your paint that you're going in on top of something else with is thicker, you have more paint on your paintbrush, and it's not too oily. Then you can really just kind of go right on top of another color and just totally overpower it. And that's really nice because that means you don't gotta be super scared of your mistakes. Well, we do kind of have that shadow on the whole side of her face. If we think about this whole head like a big egg, we got light coming from the top left, we got shadow on the right. So we could put in that shadow on her face. I think maybe we just want to put in like a general hair color too. Yeah, let's put in a big hair color. I'm sitting and I'm thinking more than I'm painting. If you try to paint and think at the same time, you're gonna be in a bad spot. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. So yeah, let's get that hair color in and we can kind of use this pile of paint anyways because it's pretty close. And I probably could use the same paintbrush too. But each new paintbrush gets its own color. So it's time for a new color, especially when I'm going from lights to darks. I wanna have paintbrushes that are for my darks and paintbrushes for my lights. I don't wanna be going back and forth between those two because that gets real murky real fast. So you get some muddy colors. Things get real gray and weird. So the hair color, it's more brown, it's more black. So I'm gonna put some more brown into it, some more of this orangey yellow ochre, and some more black into it. We're not doing crazy color theory here, guys. You don't need to be a genius. I'm putting this down, I'm looking at this. Really the top of the hair up here is quite dark. It's maybe a 2 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10. So I want to keep pushing this color pile down. That's good. I'll push it down a little bit further. Let's keep our darks darks and our lights light. And I'm gonna pay attention here to the shape of the hair. Again, we don't got to get it perfect. We can always come in with our background color and cut into it. And there is some areas where you kind of have those highlights or whatever, so maybe I'll leave some white of the canvas on there for them. But I can always come back in and carve them out later. That's the beauty of oil paint. You really can come back in and do whatever. Don't gotta be scared about making mistakes. You can always come back and fix them. So there are some areas of the hair that get significantly lighter. Mostly right in here, right in here. So I won't put too much paint down there. I won't put it down too thick. And where the background and the hair meet, I can kind of just push them together. I might want my hair to go down a little bit darker, especially around the edges. So I'm gonna just push some pretty darn black into there. Doesn't gotta be perfect. There we go. Okay, I think we're good there. We got our hair kind of mostly blocked in. We could, choose to block in the rest of this lighter hair color too. We could mix that now. And maybe that would be a good idea. What I do want to do is kind of get this general shadow tone for the whole right side of the face. That seems like the next biggest block of color. So let me think. I think the shadow tone is pretty close to the background, and that makes sense because the light from the background is probably reflecting back up into her face. So I'm going to use the same brush here, and I'm going to dip it. I'm going to dip it into my linseed oil. I'm not even really scrubbing it or anything. And I got a paper towel in my lap here, and I'm just going to wipe it off, just like this. It doesn't gotta be perfect. I wouldn't go from a really black color to a really light color, because then no matter what, you're not gonna get all this black off just cleaning briefly like this. So you're gonna taint those lights, and we wanna keep our lights nice and pure. That's why we have our own brushes for them. It's got a lot of this red. This red's running pretty thin on my palette already, so let's just mix up some more. What was the recipe again? I don't remember. Well, it was red, that's for sure. I just put a whole bunch of that down, so we're gonna need a good amount of black to counter that. That's pretty good, but we're a little too red, so let's put some more of that orange in there. And I think the shadow tone on the face, it moves in and out, so it's a little bit lighter here, it's a little bit lighter here, it's darker in here. Let's just try to get a nice average of those in there. I'd say that's a 3.5 out of 10, if we want to get real specific about it. What we got here is not bad, it's not bad. I think I'll put a little bit more orange, yellow ochre in there. That's probably pretty good right there. Let's put that in along the hair. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I always kind of check it after I put it down on the canvas, because once you put it down next to all these colors, it's going to look way different. That's why having a big palette's nice too. If you're thinking about upgrading in the future, bigger the palette, the better. You can hold it in your hand. I just got it up here vertical so you guys can see it, or you can put it on a table next to you. Lots of room to mix colors. So it comes down the side of the face here. It also kind of hits the inside of the eye socket here as well. I want to make sure I got a good amount on there on each brush stroke. I'm not sopping it on there so it's so thick I can't move it around, but enough to fill in the grain in the canvas. I know that's kind of scary, but... And there's some reflected light in here that's making this look really orange and light. Let's just make it easy, group it together. That's our motto here. Nice, big, simple, understandable groups. It kind of comes down from the eyeball here, comes to the cheek, and it connects up to the shadow casting from the nose. And it comes down here to the whole side of the mouth. The thing is this gets kind of a lot more orange here, and normally I would group them together, but it's a pretty significant change. So maybe for that part, we're gonna put just a little bit of orange into it. And I hope you guys are able to follow along with this color mixing stuff. I know I do it real quick and real fluid. I'm gonna be painting, 2, 3, 4, 5 times faster than you. Just trust me. No good paintings are made in 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. Great work, especially realist work, especially this older style of thinking, it's slow, it takes time. It's not so slow or building everything up in a million layers, taking a month to do a portrait. That's ridiculous. It's about efficiency. But you're probably, if you're painting, doing a drawing, making sure those proportions are good, you're looking at 5, 6, 8, 10, 20 hours, for a really great finished one.
And as you get better, you're going to be able to spend more time and know what to do. At first you're going to be a little bit more limited, and you're going to hit a point and you're like, well, I don't really know how to improve anymore. I don't know how to keep pushing this. And that's okay. You're just kind of hitting the natural limit of your skill level. And as you learn more, you're going to be able to keep pushing that further and further. So where else can I use this color? I'm always just looking around thinking like, all right, where else can I use my colors? A little bit up here, the hairline. That looks pretty good there. Gonna run it down the side of the face here, and it comes in and around. This part gets a little darker, but I can paint that in too later. And well, it comes into the corner of the eye over here. And as long as we get these big value relationships, right? So try not to use too many art terms, but I will use some, just because I don't want things to be confusing. We do have a language that we speak in as artists, and that language is really important. We use it to communicate, but sometimes people make this stuff real pretentious. I think it's pretty frustrating. Value is how light or how dark something is, irregardless of its color. So we don't care about if this is red or brown or this different type of red, this different shade of red. We just care about whether it is dark red, light red, black. We care about just like we have dog vision, we're on grayscale, and we're just seeing how light or how dark something is on that. That's what I'm talking about when I say from scale of 1 to 10. So as long as we nail the big value relationships of the head, things are going to look really good without any details. Just like how we nailed the proportions of the drawing without any details. And even kind of just softly push it over the eye here, because what I'm noticing is that eye really doesn't get a whole lot of light. There's a little patch of light here on top of the lid, but the rest of it, hold up a piece of white paper next to that reference, and you'll see that it's not very dark at all. So let's mix a little bit of yellow in here, a little bit of yellow ochre, and that's going to lighten it up and make it more yellow. Crazy, I know. Haven't even touched our white yet. It's kind of interesting. And now we're going to put that on this underside. And these reflected light areas, man, they're confusing. They're really, really tricky. They want to trick your eyes. Everything about painting, everything about art wants to trick your eyes. You got to be careful. Think about it compared to the darkest point on the painting and the lightest point of the painting. Your brain is going to see that reflected light and go, oh, that's so bright. Let's add a bunch of white to it. Don't do that. Remember, it's in its shadow. The shadows are one group, the lights are another group. Those shadow groups, they never mix with the light groups. So shadow can't be as light as the light because that doesn't really make any sense, right? So compare it. This underside of the chin, is it as light as the white of my canvas here? No. Is it as light as anywhere on the skin tones? No. It really doesn't even come all that close. I squint my eyes all the time to check relationships, how two things compare. So I'm just gonna group it in with those shadows. That's pretty good. Where else can I use this lighter yellow brown that I have? Oh, definitely under the mouth. This is probably about where the mouth line would be, maybe a little bit lower, the lip line. And then the bottom lip would come out pretty thin. Bottom lip, sorry to do you like that, lady. I think thin lips were actually the style in the 19th century. I think actually full lips, that's kind of a more modern contemporary thing. I think there's definitely been times in the world where having thin lips was the beauty standard. Just like having that pulled back hair, really big forehead was in the Renaissance. Here's the corner of the mouth. And maybe this little wedge that comes down, I think this needs to be a little bit lighter. Here, I'm gonna add a little bit of white here, and when I add white to stuff, it's gonna make it gray because, what is gray? It's white and black, so. I'm adding a little bit of extra color just to compensate for that gray so it doesn't get super gray really quick. Maybe I'll mix this color later because it's kind of getting a little too close to our shadows here. I'm not sure how to treat it yet. So if I'm confused about an area, I leave. I go somewhere else and I come back. It's like a puzzle. You gotta click in your border pieces, your easy ones first.
come back later and do the difficult ones. Don't spend your whole time, you never solve a puzzle by finding one really complicated piece and then one by one checking every single one. No, let's be efficient here. That's the whole goal. There's a few ways that we can do this. It's an organic process. So no right or wrong here in how you approach it, but there's definitely best practices. You can screw your proportions up and I'm not gonna go, well, there's no right or wrongs in art. No, you can get some stuff wrong. Trust me, I'm not gonna baby you guys. This is a skill that you gotta learn and you gotta practice, and over time you'll get better at. That's just the truth. And that's how I think you get to these great, really high, beautiful levels of skill where you can execute so much, as you do accept that there are some rules and you can bend them and be really creative about them, but you still gotta understand them and learn them first before you go about twisting them. So there's no right or wrong way to go about the order of these steps, but there are some best practices, and I have an option here. I'm at a crossroad. I could put in a general light skin tone for everything and get those contrasts locked in, or I could keep stepping my way up from light to dark and put a transition tone from my dark shadow to my light at the edge of the shadows. I think it'd be best in simplicity and everything. Let's take this brush here, still working pretty big brushes, and let's lay in all of our general light skin tones. So let's mix that up now. I'm running out of room that you guys can see here. So let's do this, and let's get quite a bit of white on there. And the skin tone, it's a little pink, it's a little grayish maybe, and maybe a little orange. So pink, we can do that. I'm just really carefully dabbing my brush in the edge here. And a little orange. When you're mixing these lights, you gotta be really subtle about the amount of stuff you put into them. Let me look at what I got here. I think that looks pretty good compared to my reference, so. Yeah, I like that. I think that's pretty good. I wanna make sure you don't get it too dirty, too muddy. There is a whole lot going on underneath what I'm doing here. I hate to break it to you. But painting is hard, it's complicated, but that means there's lots and lots to learn and keep pushing forever. Even the direction that I pull my brush strokes in, I'm pulling along the feeling of the face. I'm pulling over the bones, across the muscles. I study this stuff and I study it through drawing. And my drawings, my master copies like we're doing right now, all this stuff really helps you improve. That's why we started with a drawing. You can't use your lousy drawing skills to, you can't use painting as a way to run away from your lousy drawing skills. Not at all. Sorry to break that to you, but you're doing the same thing with paint as you are with drawing, but now you gotta do it with this awful brush instead of a nice precise pencil or charcoal. Definitely get a lot more gray here along the bottom side and even the edges in here. So we'll want to mix kind of a grayer value. We're losing some of these bristles from this cheap brush in here, but that's all right. Yeah, maybe we need to mix that grayer value. So I'd really try to recommend dedicating one brush just to your super bright lights. That way it doesn't get muddy. But maybe that won't be this brush. Maybe it will be. Nah, whatever. So we just want to gray it out. So how do we make gray? Well, first let's just bolster up this paint pile. We're ripping through this stuff, I told you guys. Okay, and now we need it to be grayer. Well, we already have some kind of grayish brown stuff over here, so. Hey, look at that. It's pretty gray. Maybe a little bit darker. Wait and look. Yeah, that looks pretty good. The nice thing about, the thing about this ivory black here is ivory black is actually really blue. It has a lot of blue tint in it. And this palette of only 4 paints doesn't have blue. But that bluish tint comes from our ivory black. And you can see just how bluish green that's going down, just like the painting. It's almost like we're using many of the same colors that Sargent was using. And of course, you can put whatever colors you need on your palette. This is just a limited one to get you started. There's a whole world to explore out there, but to be honest, you really just need kind of the basic primary colors in their more warm or more cool variants, and then you can kind of mix everything in between. So you don't really need, for most cases, or almost all cases, a palette full of like 20 different colors and all these fancy different skin tone mixes, like pre-skin tone mix palettes. That stuff is ridiculous. Don't need that at all. You just need the simple stuff. There's this gray just going in, and because this is a little bit thicker and I'm on such a nice thick bristle brush, we cut right over that saturated skin and put the gray on top of it. That's pretty nice. Generally, if I wanted to get a really great drawing done and have those proportions locked in, I'd spend 3 hours on the drawing. I really would. That's not ridiculous at all. That's not a waste of time. That's going to help you out a lot. So don't think that just because you see me doing something in 20 minutes, well, I'm trying to make a show here, you know. You're going to have to move a lot slower, and that's plenty fine. I would have to move slower if I were to do this properly. But this is a great start. And a great way to get comfortable with the materials. And we're just really developing a nice strong contrast here. So let's finish filling in this face. We need kind of these hair tones up here. We need maybe some a little more orange, kind of like darker tone in here. And I think we'll have all that base tone laid in and covering up the face. Oh, I got a little bit muddy there. That's okay, just cover her up. Hair color, it's lighter than the shadows, so it's on the light side and it's kind of brown. It's lighter, it's on that brown area. Let's get a bunch of brown over here. And it's kind of grayish brown, so I'll put some black in there and then I'll put some white in there. Maybe a little bit more black. You can pull from different parts of our paint piles. Keep graying it out until I feel like it's at that nice greenish gray level, which I think we're getting to right now. That looks pretty good, I think. Let's test it out. I feel like I'm on point today, maybe a little bit lighter. I feel like I'm hitting these. Feels good. I think it's the spray fixative. It's doing some numbers on me. I still smell that. I would really advise going outside, or maybe having a fan even. Now we need a mid-tone orange, and it's a pretty bright orange too. So we got some red here, yellow ochre, and you'll note that I'm not, pre-mixing skin tones or anything like that. I just see a color and I try to match it. And for the most part, I'm really not even thinking about like complex color theory stuff either. I'm just like, all right, is it red? Yeah, it's red. Does it need to be lighter? Yeah, it probably needs to be lighter. That type of thought. And we're all capable of doing that. All right, so now we got that's a pretty rich orange right there. That might be pretty good. Let's put it on the corner here and see. It's looking too red, so let's keep putting more yellow into it until it's not so red. I think maybe slightly lighter, and it really still needs to be more yellowy orange. That's not bad. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Let's go with that. And if you spend 2-3 hours on a good painting, then you come back the next day, you do 2-3 more hours, and then, you know, see where you're at, put a couple sessions into a painting. That's going to give your eyes time to rest, and you can come back, see mistakes. Guys, look, then think, and then put your brush mark down, and then you do it all over again. Don't do all three at the same time. You can't handle it. I can't handle it. No one can handle it. So don't make painting an impossible task and then go, well, why can't I do it? Well, you made it an impossible task. You were the person who made it impossible for you. Just wiping off my brush here while I think. Probably put in some pupils. We can put some of that black in for the pupils. Why not? We'll just kind of block out nice big black pupils. You can paint out those details later. It's okay. Make sure you take your time and try to figure out where it is, though. We're not making a perfect replica or masterpiece here. You can go watch my other videos. I do have videos where I am trying to go for a lot closer of a master copy. And that's just not the goal here. We're just trying to get comfortable with this stuff and learn a thing or two about paint. There's so much to learn from how Sargent paints, and we can learn that through just copying, just like this. So, you know, we're not trying to get perfection here. And if you try to, you're only gonna hurt yourself. I already got some red over here, so we can just use this kind of dark red area. Put some more red in there. The top lip, it's dark. It's in shadow. It's a lot closer to our brownish red than like a pure red, so maybe something like that. I think we need to get a little darker. So there's a little bit of a swoop in the middle, a little bit of like a diamond or triangle shape in the middle of our lips. And when I'm working like this, where I'm cutting into other paint, I'm coming in and I'm getting fresh paint on my brush every single time so it doesn't get muddy. And this comes out from the middle of the nose, and then it comes over and it swoops down. Okay, so I'm thinking about what is going to make the biggest bang for my buck here. I still think there's a darker gray kind of skin tony color that's a transition in areas like in here. So I want to get that darker gray color. So we already have the gray of the hair here, so why don't I just add a little bit of white to it and see where that takes us. And this is probably the darker bit of it here. Put a little bit of black into it to make it darker. Oh, I put a little bit too much black into it. I wonder what's going to happen. Yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit lighter than that. And I'm just barely dipping into the edge of the pile, and if I need more paint, I'll come back and pull over. I try not to go too hard. That's not bad. Still using, you know, this big brush is all I got for my darks at this point, so I'm still gonna use it for that, and that's fine. Using it on its edge, and it's working just fine.
I'm coming through now and just kind of piece by piece working on the transitions between things. I have all those colors blocked in, and if I back up a little bit here, you're gonna start to see from a distance, it reads all right. You know, it's not perfect by any means, but we're getting there. And we can start to work on these transitions to make things softer. And a transition isn't just blending an edge with a brush and making it really soft. No, a transition is mixing a value that's gonna fit in between those edges. And it's gonna just add an extra plane. It's gonna turn the form there. So let me show you. I'll mix another kind of grayish value in between here. Here's my grayish value I'm gonna mix in between here. That's gonna go in between this orange. And it's gonna help that orange turn in a little bit faster and not look so abrupt and out of nowhere. And it's naturally gonna get softer as I keep adding more of these values and I get them right and I make adjustments. That's what this stuff is. And this is the only time you'll see me take out a little brush, and I could probably do this with a slightly bigger one too. I'm just working with what I got here. But we don't take out this small brush until we're deep into the process and we're making refinements. We already have the big color relationships down and we've decided that they're strong enough. Now we're allowed to delve into the details just a little bit. But let's never lose sight of the whole. And certainly some areas where I'm disunified, so my lights need to be nice and close together. That's what makes a great painting, is your lights and your shadows stay close together but far apart from each other. So everything in my lights is nice and close together. Everything in my shadows is nice and close together, but those two groups are far away. So I'm losing some unity in areas like this where I've come in with that gray a bit too hard. We need to make that light, put a little bit of color into that light. Oh, way too much red, so you made a mistake here. Did a mistake and I got my light brush a little bit too muddy. And then I went to paint back into my lights and got all messed up. So I'm just using my palette knife here. Scrape down all that paint. Now let's make sure this is nice and clean. And we just go right back over. And hey, we're back. Already got most of the meat of this painting in, so we just got to make sure we get those proportions dialed in. And we're going to be in a good spot really quick. Not the most accurate painting, but it's not our goal today. As long as we set our goals properly, then we can make great progress. You got to know where to put your energy. All right, washed hands, hour 47. Let's close this bad boy up. Get more light into my skin tones, and I think I want a little bit more orange in there too. Let's keep jamming more white in there though. Let's really push the luminosity or the amount of brightness in these lights. We're just trying to get like the big general read here. We don't care about the subtleties. We don't got time for that. And if you kind of hit that level of proportion, you get into a nice area like this. Take a night off. Let it sit for a little bit. Then you can come back and think about that. And you can push into that territory. Your second, third, fourth session is going to get really, really, really good. But you know, we're just making our way through these things one step at a time, and that's okay. Hit some of the reflected light under the chin too, I suppose. So I'll take my shadow brush, this one, just so muddy. I've used it for everything at this point. So many blacks I normally paint with more than 5 brushes. Generally, I'll have about 10 in my hand, really. 5's probably a good idea, so it's always better to kind of boil things down, simplify them, than to just keep expanding and save 20 brushes. Now, if you need that many brushes, really, if you need 10 even, I'm probably a little bit on the maximalist side here. You probably have some inefficiency in your values and your colors, and you can think out your colors a little bit better, so you don't need to be swapping back and forth so often. That's pretty good. I just put some yellow in here because it needed to be more yellow. I hope you guys are really understanding the advanced theory of my color here. So intimidating, so confusing. I think from a distance here, our read is pretty good. We're a little bit stronger, not quite as soft and as beautiful and delicate, I think, as the original. A little bit more angular, but it's also the first session. And this original painting took, probably 10 hours or so. And I'm not Sargent also. We all have something to learn, and I'm, always still trying to improve. There's so much to learn with all this stuff, so. Let's use that same kind of yellowy color here. I'll put a little bit of red and maybe a little bit of white in here to brighten it up. And some more yellow. We're gonna go up to that hair. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, since this is next to all those real dark colors, it doesn't need to be that bright. Those dark colors around it make it look brighter than it really is. And I think we can go a little bit brighter here, but yeah, that should be fine. You can tell that it's just put in these vertical strokes, just like this. A little bit smaller than mine.
And here we are, after 2 hours. And is it perfect? No. I mean, 3 hours or 2 hours is incredibly fast. I would probably spend 3 hours on a quick painting sketch. Painting just takes a lot of time, especially to get accuracy and likeness, but none of those things were our goals today. We're just getting comfortable and feeling good about using a new medium, which can be really scary. But I hope I've shown you how simple this can be and how flexible it is. We can paint over our mistakes. And if worst comes to worst, we can just scrape the paint right off and try again, or let it dry and paint right over the top. The world is your oyster. We'll go clean up our brushes here in a second, but I just want to say that there's no secrets. This technique looks kind of cruel or crude and primitive, but there's no secret technique that's going to make you any better at painting. The only thing that's going to make you better at painting is improving your drawing skill, improving your proportions, your anatomy understanding, all these smaller fundamental skills. Painting is just a reflection of that. So keep working on your skills, and the only difference between you and a master is time. We got a dirty palette and some dirty brushes, so now we got to clean them. Every single person in my Discord or that I talk to always talks about using turpentine, which is this really toxic, nasty, smelly stuff that's just terrible for you to clean their brushes and their palette, but that stuff is horrible for everything. I mean, it's very corrosive, so those brushes, those bristles on your brushes, those are gonna really lose their shape and they're gonna fall out because of that turpentine exposure. And we don't really even have to use that stuff. I got no idea why people are buying that. So let's back up here. First, we'll do the palette. So I got some paper towels here. The unfortunate thing about painting is it just does seem to be quite wasteful as far as paper towels go. I'll use my palette knife here or whatever you got and just scrape off as much paint as I can. And I can leave my piles along the edges, just make sure they don't creep in too much and take up your palette. And those will stay wet for, since they're really thick, they'll stay wet for a while. They might get a little bit of like a skin over the top of them, but you can just kind of pull that skin off or dig under it with your brush and keep using it. And I'll take some of my linseed oil or whatever oil you got. Just put a little bit on, don't need too much. That's maybe a little bit on the excess side. I'll take my paper towel here, and the oil dissolves the paint. So we don't gotta use stuff like turpentine or Gamsol or anything. This stuff is much safer. Does just as good of a job. I could put a little bit on my paper towel too, but I pretty much have enough here. And that's all clean. All you need to do, and we got to do our brushes too. You could dip these in a little bit of oil to make this part easier. We're gonna have to go to the sink in a second here. But before we go to the sink, just let's get as much of this off as we can. That's going to make the washing process a lot easier. I'm thinking about getting a small brush washing tank and filling it with some linseed oil just so I can get these a little bit cleaner before I go to the sink. But it doesn't really matter that much. You don't even really have to do this. It's probably just better for your sink, for your pipes. Okay, so you got some dirty brushes now, and what I use is this stuff right here. Now, any dish soap will work just fine, so it doesn't really matter. And all you're gonna do is take your dirty brush, get some water going here. I'll put a little bit of dish soap and some water in my hand, and then as I swirl that brush in my hand, all that dish soap is gonna pick up that paint, and it's going to run right off. I also will just kind of put it on the side of the sink here and just swirl it in there. Just like this. And we're going to do this over and over and over again until the water runs clear. This is a pretty time-consuming process, which is why it's nice to get off as much as you can before you come in here. But you really want to make sure you don't got anything left on that brush at the end. So make sure that water's running clear when you rinse it out. See, that brush is right back to normal. We didn't have to use any toxic solvents. This one's got a lot of dark pigment in there. So it's going to take quite a bit of work. Your skin is kind of, it's a textured surface, but it's soft. And so it's going to be really good to help clean that brush and scrub it without hurting the bristles too much. And it's not staining my skin or rubbing into anything at all because the soap forms a barrier. Now sometimes when you're painting a lot, you'll get some paint stuck up all the way at the top here. And you've got to get that out. So what you do is you saturate it in soap just like that. Then you want to grab the end bristles and move it, wiggle it just like this. And you see there's some colored, that's not white. So we're getting some nice pigment out of there.
and that water's not clear. And I try to shape my brush tip too when I'm done, just so it doesn't get super frayed. There's some stuff you can buy at the art store too, if it does get frayed, that you can use to reshape it. But just try to make sure the bristles are laying down nice and even. And when you're done cleaning all your brushes, set them down flat or like this at an angle without the tip smushing, of course. You want to make sure that that's nice and steady, not hitting the ground. But I just set them down flat on the ground with some paper towels underneath them, because if it's sitting upright like this, what's going to happen is all the water that's stuck in here comes back and it deactivates the glue inside of your brush, and it can hurt the brush over time. And you got to clean your brushes pretty much at the end of every day that you paint. Sometimes if my palette becomes a mess and all my brushes get muddy, in the middle of a long painting day, I will just clean everything and just start from fresh and remix all my colors. It's the only way you can get rid of that muddiness. And we'll just wipe all this paint down so that our mom or girlfriend or whatever doesn't get mad at us. Hopefully those aren't the same person. That would be weird.